Before sunrise, a wooden bar lifts and a square of orange light spills onto the lane. The forge exhales smoke, heat, and the sharp tang of hot metal. Inside, the air shivers. A hammer waits on a scarred anvil. Bellows hang like a lung. This is a small town shop in Western Europe, somewhere between 1200 and 1500. Charcoal is the fuel of the age. It burns hot and clean enough to work iron. A coke won't arrive until the 1700s. In some places, later in the Middle Ages, you might see water or foot-powered bellows. Most days, though, the breath that feeds the fire comes from hands and shoulders, hour after hour. Henrik the smith draws the first heat. The bellows wheeze. Scale sparks pop like dry corn. A bucket of quench water steams like soup. The anvil's face is the only flat thing in a warped morning. Outside, the road will call this hero's work. Inside, it's heat, noise, and a clock that runs on fuel you can barely afford. The fire comes first, so the first bill is always fuel. The forge eats forests by the sack. You hear it in the bellows, draw, sigh, flare. And you see it in the way the hearth swallows, each shovelful like a hungry mouth. Miss a single delivery, and the whole day sags. Metal cools, orders stack, tempers rise. Most village and market. Town smithies live on a short leash, held by charcoal burners in the nearby woods. Charcoal is not just wood. It's wood baked slow in covered mounds or small kilns until smoke, water, and sticky tars bleed away. What's left is light, black, and hot enough to turn iron soft. Lords and towns watch those woods closely. Who can cut? How much? And when? Because woodland rights mean money, fences, and fines. In good seasons, carts roll in steady. In wet months, or when the forester closes a stand, prices jump. Add gate tolls and bridge fees, and the fire's appetite becomes a tax you pay before you earn a single coin. At the hearth, heat rules everything. Bloomery iron, the common iron of this age, likes a working heat around 1200 degrees Celsius. That's a bright orange, near yellow, where scale flakes like black snow, and iron moves under the hammer. Keeping that temperature is labor, a steady rhythm on the bellows, a careful eye on the air, and wood turned to charcoal at a rate you can feel in your purse. Some towns later adopt water, or foot-powered bellows, but most shops still run on backs and shoulders. The fire doesn't care how tired you are, it goes out the moment you stop feeding it. An apprentice stumbles in with 2 sacks that feel wrong, too light. Charcoal dust fountains when they hit the floor. The seller at the gate swore. That's what came from the clamp. The master cuts one open, big, unbaked chunks, grey in the middle. They'll smoke, not burn. Do you pay again and keep the hearth alive, or send the boy back and watch today's orders drift to tomorrow? Outside, a carter is already waiting for wheel hoops. A Reeves horse lost a shoe. The clock is heat. Every minute the hearth cools is a minute the shop earns nothing. This is why the job bleeds money up front. Fuel first, always. The forge must be hot before a hinge, a nail, or a shoe can exist. Without steady charcoal, nothing gets made, no debts shrink, no bread crosses your table. And even when the sacks are honest, and the fire is perfect, there's a second trap waiting. You can buy good fuel, and keep the heat steady, only to discover the iron itself is bad, and your week breaks in two. The bar looks good until it splits like stale bread. One hammer blows, a dry crack, and a dark line opens across the heat. The sound cuts through the shop louder than the bellows. What looked like solid iron was only iron holding a secret. Most smiths did not smelt their own metal. They bought blooms or bars from local bloomeries or from merchants passing through town. Quality swung with the ore, the charcoal, and the smelter's skill. Some bars were clean and tough. Others were laced with slag. Glass, like streaks that hide inside the metal. Hit them wrong and the piece tears. Reheat it, and the tear can grow. Across the medieval period, production leaned on bloomeries, small furnaces that gave a spongy lump of wrought iron full of slag and voids. In parts of Europe, larger blast furnaces began to appear in the late Middle Ages and spread after, boosting output, but not wiping out quality problems. Water-powered tilt hammers, called martinets in some regions and hammerwork in German lands, showed up by the 1200s, 1300s. They helped refine blooms by pounding them again and again. But even with these tools, a good Bar was never guaranteed. Vignette. Dawn frost still shines in the fields when a ploughshare snaps. The farmer's team jolts. The furrow ends in a muddy scar. By mid-morning he storms into the forge, the broken share under his arm. "This lasted 2 days," he says. Henrik sets the pieces on the anvil. The break shows the truth: dark veins, a sand-grey face where slag ran through the heart. He could argue. It won't matter. The plough must be fixed today or seed goes late. He grinds the edges clean, heats both halves to a bright yellow, spreads flux, and brings them together. The bellows pump hard. Hammer faces kiss a dozen times a second. Tap to set, strike to weld, draw to blend. The shop smells of hot scale and sweet smoke. When the seam vanishes, he cools and sharpens the share. It is good work. It is also half a day lost. No one pays for the first failure. No one pays for the fuel it ate. This is the silent drain of bad iron rework without coin, promises delayed, and a reputation that takes the hit. One failure becomes a rumor by nightfall. The smith's iron is weak. To protect his name, a careful smith tests stock when he can. A small bend under heat, a light cut to see the grain, a trial weld on an off cut. Each test costs time and charcoal, and the queue at the door grows. Why it matters when material fails, the shop bleeds twice, once in fuel and hours, again in trust. A week can break around a single bad bar. To keep coins coming in spite of all this, many smiths turn to the only safe bet. Endless small things made fast: nails, shoes, hoops, and hinges. A town eats nails like a ship eats rope. You hear it in the hammer's rhythm. Tap to set, strike to shape, cut to length, and you see it on market mornings when the door never fully closes. The fire is already bright. Today will be about speed. Most medieval smiths did not make armor or fancy blades. That work existed, but it was the exception. The daily grind was everyday ironware: nails for roofs and barrels, hinges for doors, hoops for wheels and casks, and, always, horseshoes. In 13th century Paris, the craft code known as Le Livre des Métiers, compiled under Provost Étienne Boileau, lists iron trades with rules for work and quality: farriers, cutlers, locksmiths, and more. It shows a world where simple hardware runs the city, and standards try to keep it honest. Farriery, shoeing horses, stood as its own branch, and demand spiked with fairs, plough seasons, and war. When carts roll or armies move, the anvil does not rest. It's market day. 3 carts stand by the door, each wheel loose on its spokes. Wheel bands, iron hoops, must be heated in the yard, dropped over the wood, and quenched so they bite tight. While the band warms, a bailiff's gelding stamps on the cobbles. It dropped a shoe in the mud. The farrier's stand comes out. Clinches are cut, the foot is pared, and a bar shoe is bent to match the hoof. Sparks fan across wet stones. Just inside, a widow clutches a broken latch. A merchant waves a bent hasp. A cooper needs a handful of clout nails. By noon, each is a tiny job. Each wants it now. None is priced for the time it steals. The work is about flow. Nail, rod goes to the heat, while a shoe is shaped on the horn. A hinge leaf is set to cool, while the wheel band is carried out with tongs. Nails are drawn, cut, headed. Dozens an hour if the bar is good and the fire behaves. Hinges must close true. A bad angle costs another heat. A single stubborn rivet adds minutes you can't bill. Customers watch. They don't see the wasted charcoal, only the waiting. A ledger would show it clearly: small coins in, fuel out, and your back as the buffer. Volume keeps the door open, but it traps the shop in low margin urgency. You live by the quick fix and the steady drip of little payments, while the big pieces, the kind that might pay for a full week's fuel, rarely appear. Reputation becomes the only lever you have: fast, fair, and solid. Miss one promise, and the queue moves to another door. This is how most forges survived, by turning speed into money, one small job at a time. But speed and heat are a risky mix. The faster the hands, the thinner the safety. The next section includes injuries and burns. Push a shop into this pace, and the math catches up. Speed plus heat equals mistakes and injuries. The forge marks you, first with blisters, later with a cough. The heat paints your face, the hammer rings in your ear, and the air you breathe is the same air the fire steals. This is close work in tight rooms. Sparks leap like bees. Hot scale flakes off each blow and flies at eye level. Bars run yellow and heavy, tongs bite only so well. In winter the doors stay shut to hold the heat, and the smoke hangs low. A smith's world is sweat, glare, and weight. The risks are simple and constant. Burns from missed strikes and dropped stock, fingers crushed between iron and anvil, eyes hit by scale or grit. In stuffy shops, the smoke and gases, especially carbon monoxide, can make a head swim and a stomach turn. Medieval records don't list occupational health the way modern books do, but court rolls, miracle stories, and later trade reports point to the same pattern: bad eyes, bad lungs, bad backs. Many smiths in later centuries spoke of hammer deafness, ears dulled by years of ringing iron. It would be odd if their medieval forebears were spared. A tong slips, a yellow bar skids from the anvil to the floor. The apprentice throws out a boot to stop it, and learns a lesson the hard way. The leather smokes, and his ankle blisters under wool. He will carry that scar into summer. At the same bench, the master tilts his head to sight a straight line. One eye films in the light. The other does the judging now. He works by habit and feel, aware of the soft hiss that means the quench is boiling too hard, the sweet, bitter smell that means the room needs air. Heavy pieces hurt most. Wheel bands and plough irons need 2 men to move, and 3 good strikes to set. A missed cue, 1 heartbeat, and a knuckle blooms purple. Long days turn care into hurry. Hurry turns skill into luck. The forge is not cruel, it is indifferent. It asks for heat and movement, and gives no warning when a bar tears and whips, or when a rivet pops hot into a sleeve. Pride covers some of the cost. A smith will laugh off a blister and tie a rag over a cut. He will say the cough is from the morning damp. But the aches line up into a calendar, a fresh burn in spring, a strange shoulder after harvest, a winter of sore lungs when winds force the door shut. Injury is not a surprise here, it is a schedule. The craft looks bold from the lane, but the body pays the bill. Every hinge and shoe on the town's doors and hooves was bought with skin, breath, and hearing. And still, if you wanted to rise, to sign your own work and keep your own shop, you had to climb a long, gated ladder. 7 years to be allowed to sign your own work, if the guild lets you. That is the quiet rule behind the noise of the anvil. You don't just learn to strike straight, you learn to wait. In towns, the shop's fate sits under guild rules. Wardens set hours, test work, check prices, and find cheats. In villages, a lord or bailiff plays a similar role, granting permission to trade and taking rents or dues. You can move to another town. Yes, but it's risky. A stranger pays higher fees, needs new sponsors, and may find doors closed until he proves himself again. We can read some of the systems straight out of the 1200s. In Paris, the craft code called the Livre des Métiers, around 1268, sets terms for iron trades, how long an apprentice serves, what the master must teach, and how wardens inspect work. In German lands, a journeyman often went on a Wanderschaft, traveling years to learn new shops and methods, building skill and a network before trying for master status. The path is real, but it is steep. Martin has swept floors and swung the sledge since he was a boy. He learned to shoe a nervous horse, to draw out nail, rod without wasting metal, to set a hinge that swings true. Today he stands in the guild hall with his masterwork, a matched pair of door hinges that close on a whisper. No wobble. No binding. The wardens lift them, weigh them by feel, and lay them on a board marked square. They nod at the fit. Then one warden tilts a leaf to the light and finds a thin file mark across a knuckle. Almost nothing, a touch left from finishing. The room holds its breath. The verdict is short, not clean. The stamp does not fall. The fee he paid to be tested is gone. The wood for the fire he burned to make these, also gone. He will try again in a year. If he can save enough coins, and if his current master agrees to spare him the time. This is how the ladder holds you. Guilds protect buyers from junk work, and they keep trade secrets inside the craft. That safety matters. But the same rules ration opportunity. A failed test, an unpaid fee, a master who won't sign your good conduct. Any one of these keeps a man circling the same rung. Years pass. A journeyman marries, has a child, and still cannot open his own door. He keeps working for day wages, loyal but stuck, while the cost of fuel, rent, and tools never rests. The standards make solid hinges and honest weights, but they also make long dependency. Skill alone isn't enough. Permission is the other half, and the men who grant that permission answer to city bylaws that can choke a forge. The next heat brings rules, fines, and fire wardens. Your fire is a public risk, your hammer is a public nuisance. That's how the town hears you. At dusk the curfew bell rolls across timber roofs. Doors must close, lights must dim. A forge that roars after hours sounds like trouble. This is a dense wooden world. Lanes tight as hallways, eaves almost touching. Cities post bylaws about night fires, smoke, and where hot trades may work. In many places a bell marks the hour when open flames must be banked. Wardens walk the streets, checking shutters, counting hearths, and noting who still throws sparks. Metal trades sit high on their list: heat, smoke, noise, and crowds. Records from medieval cities show how this played out. In some towns, inspectors could fine a smith for working past the bell, for an uncovered hearth, or for smoke that drifted into a neighbor's loft. City codes also pushed dangerous crafts, founders, tanners, and sometimes smiths, toward water or out to less crowded quarters. The logic was simple: keep flames and fumes away from tight housing, markets, and churches. The effect on a small shop was heavy more rent in a new district, longer walks for customers, and stricter visits from officers who knew exactly what to measure. Mid-morning, a city sergeant steps into the forge with a wooden rod and a wax tablet. He notes the heap of charcoal too near the door, checks that the clinker box is clean, and sticks the rod into the quench tub to make sure it is deep enough to smother a drop bar. He taps the bellows frame, looks for a spark screen, and asks for the shutter that should hang over the hearth mouth when work pauses. While he writes, a neighbor pushes in, shaking a sheet. "Sparks burned my linen," she says. The sergeant eyes the suit on the sill and scratches a number on the tablet. The fine, when read aloud, equals a week of nails. No one argues. The law reads the same for all, but it lands heaviest where the heat lives. This is not just about safety. It is also about order and sound. Hammers ring through walls, shoeing horses crowds the lane, smoke stains whitewash near the church. The town needs ironwork, hinges, hoops, tools, and shoes keep the place moving. Yet the same town trains its rules on the very shops that provide it. Every inspection steals time. Every fine eats fuel money. Move a shop to the riverside to please the wardens, and you lose passing trade from the market. Stay where you are and you pay, over and over, for noise and risk the city will never fully forgive. Even when your work feeds the town law can squeeze the hand that feeds it, through curfews, inspections, zoning, and the constant threat of fire. Then war arrived and squeezed harder. When armies move, they take iron, and the men who shape it. You hear it before you see it: hoofbeats, a trumpet, then the slap of a wax seal against your door. The forge heat doesn't change, but the work does. Overnight, your shop becomes part of a campaign. Campaign seasons, like those of the 100 Years' War, 1337–443, hit forges hard. Horses eat shoes as fast as soldiers eat bread. Wagons split pens, axles need bands, arrowheads must be made by the sack, and armor wants rivets and quick repairs. The crown calls this service. To a shop, it feels like being drafted. The machinery behind it was real. English and French rulers issued purveyance, or requisition, orders that let royal officers take supplies and hire skilled hands at fixed, official prices. Payment could be late or light. Earlier, in 1181, England's assize of arms set who must keep weapons by status. That law echoed for centuries. Local smiths kept ordinary people's gear usable. Helm straps, spear sockets, buckles. Because a law on paper means little if iron fails in the field. A royal officer steps into the yard, cloak wet from the road. He nails a small parchment to the post. Wax glows red where the seal bites. "By the king's need," he says, "this shop is retained." A list follows. 5 dozen shoes in 3 days, 20 wagon pins, a barrel of nails, arrowheads by the handful. He points at the journeyman with the steady swing. "You, farrier with the arm, report to the mustering field at dawn. Payment later." The officer rides on to the next door. You add fuel to the hearth and feel your stomach drop. The pace turns brutal. Shoe a kicking warhorse in rain. Work by torch when the curfew bell says, stop. Heat wheel bands in the yard and try not to set the straw alight. Rivet a visor while a sergeant tells you a captain is waiting. When something breaks on the road, and something always does, the blame runs downhill to the nearest anvil. Bad iron, they say. Bad work. No one counts the cracked bars, the wet charcoal, or the nights you welded until your hands shook. War also rearranges the town. Strong backs leave with the baggage train. Apprentices vanish for season and don't return. Prices shift. A sack of charcoal costs more in the week the army camp sits by the mill. The jobs that kept ordinary people moving. Latches, hose, hinges. Wait at the back while soldiers' kit goes first. Goodwill things. A neighbor with a broken latch sees the horseshoes you're making and decides you chose sides. War turns a private craft into a public service, but the guarantee of pay or fairness doesn't come with the seal. The forge carries state work on a shop's risk. And when the banners finally leave, the debt stays, charcoal to pay, rent to meet, taxes due, and thin seasons ahead. Iron comes in bars, payment comes in promises. That is the quiet rule under every loud blow. You take iron from the rack and make a hinge, a hoop, a shoe. The customer nods, thanks you, and says he'll settle, after the fair, when the rent is due, or once the grain is sold. Cash is thin in most towns, rent has fixed dates. Teethers and tolls do not wait. People pay with timing as much as with coin. Many deals are in kind, grain, wool, a day's work, or on credit, written or spoken. This isn't unusual, it's the system. Borough courts across Europe kept lists of small debt cases, a few pence for nails, the price of a horseshoe, a promise on a plough repair. Craftsmen sued and were sued. The records read like a ledger of everyday life. Lean months stretch the craft to its edge. A shop will pawn a spare hammer or a set of tongs to raise fuel money. Scraps of iron, offcuts, broken hoops, rivet tails. Go to the founder for a few coins and a promise of better price next time. If the charcoal burner wants cash up front, the smith must choose he sell scrap at a loss or let the fire go dark. No heat means no work. No work means no rent. The math is simple and cruel. After the curfew bell, the shop is quiet but the master is not. He opens a lither roll and smooths the ties. Inside sit slips of parchment and folded notes. 2 hinges for the inn, 4 shoes for the reeve's cart, 1 unpaid ploughshare for the farmer who swore the harvest would cover it. He counts. It would pay the month, if the money came. He looks at the scrap bine, a tangle of bent nails, a cracked strap, a wheel band with 1 bad weld. Tomorrow he will carry it to the founder and take whatever price is offered. With that he will buy charcoal. With charcoal he can work. With work he might collect. The circle tightens, but it still turns. You learn tricks to survive. Make nails while the big piece heats. Tip a tool for half price if the customer brings back the old one. Keep a jar of odd rivets for the job that only needs something that fits. Offer small discounts for cash on the nail. Keep your promises in order. The fastest way to lose money is to lose trust. But even then, the calendar owns you. Quarter-day rent, the tithe basket on Sunday, the city tax when wardens walk the street. Those are iron dates, not promises. Steady hands and full days don't guarantee money. A smith's skill can be strong while his purse is weak. Debt shadows the craft even when the anvil sings, and yet people kept lighting the fire, day after day. Why? The answer waits where we began, in that first square of orange light, and what it bought for the town. Back to the first light in the doorway. The same breath of orange, but now you hear the billet whispers. Heat, noise, and hours turned into iron, a hinge that swings true, a shoe that saves a horse, a band that keeps a wheel from falling apart. We step outside the shop and look at what that glow held together all day. Carts rolling, fields turning, doors hanging straight, travelers crossing town without a loose nail to trip them. Across medieval Europe, blacksmiths sat at the center of this everyday engine, not at court, not in the counting house. At the anvil. Parish by parish, the work kept villages alive. Folklore knew this. In England, people told stories of St. Dunstan, a smith turned saint who could pinch the devil with hot tongs, linking the forge not only to power, but to piety. Legends like that say what the records also show the craft mattered. Yet most smiths were not rich. Shop books, rents, and fines suggest a steady truth. Essential work, thin margins. Watch the town through a smith's eyes, and you see how much iron touches. The plough that sets the seed on time, the lock that keeps goods safe, the hoop that holds a barrel sole does not leak on market day. You also see the hidden cost forests burned to charcoal, lungs smoked thin, fingers nicked and burned, nights spent at the anvil because a cart must roll at dawn. The coin that finally lands in a palm has passed through many hands. Tolls, teethers, rent, and the hand that shaped the metal keeps the least. Evening. The anvil cools under a damp rag, steam ghosting in the last light. The day's clinker sit in a pail. On the bench lies a hinge, the kind Martin once carried to the guild hall. This one is perfect now. The knuckles line up like beads, the pin slides in with a soft click. The master lifts it, walks to his own door, and hangs it there. The leaf swings, silent as breath. For once, the best piece stays home. This is why the job sucked, and why people did it anyway. The craft that made a community also consumed the people who practiced it. Fuel, health, time, and chance. Pride and service carried them across that gap. That tension hasn't vanished. Wherever skilled, risky work is underpriced. On farms, in workshops, in server rooms glowing at 2 a.m. The old math returns. The town needs the job, the worker pays the bill. So we end where we began, at the door with the orange light. Now we know what it cost to keep it burning, and what it bought for everyone else. If this journey sharpened how you see the cost of making, subscribe. Next time we'll follow the metal upstream to the forests and mines that fed this fire.